What's going on, USG fam? Welcome back to the Uncommon Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Noah Weiss, and I'm so excited to bring you this week's episode of the podcast featuring Bryan Driskell, Notre Dame football analyst and the owner of Irish Breakdown. Prior to running Irish Breakdown, Bryan was a coach at the college level at multiple schools, including Duquesne, Muhlenberg College, and Defiance College. And in this conversation, Bryan talks about the world of sports media and analysis and how Irish Breakdown came to be, as well as talking about how he uses his platform in Irish Breakdown for God's glory. I think you'll find this conversation encouraging, but also challenging of how we can use our platforms in athletics to glorify God. Before we dive in, I do want to call attention to USG's Spring 2025 Reflection Scholarship. If you are in need of funding for student loans, tuition, or other career-related financial needs, then this scholarship is for you. Be sure to submit your application by Friday, April 18th to be considered and potentially earn funds for your needs. Tap the link in the description of this podcast to learn more about the application process and to submit your application. Without further ado, here's this week's episode of the Uncommon Podcast featuring the owner of Irish Breakdown, Bryan Driskell. Podcasts are pretty common. So what makes the Uncommon Podcast uncommon? Well, it's all in our name. I'm your host, Noah Weiss, and we at Uncommon Sports Group understand the unique pressures and temptations that come with a career in the sport industry. We provide uncommon training that helps you successfully navigate common challenges. Hit the follow button on this podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Check out our website and become uncommon. Bryan, it's great to have you on the podcast with me today. I appreciate you joining me.
I appreciate your patience. We've been trying to get this done here for a couple weeks now, but vacation and scheduling conflicts have prevented me from jumping on, but I'm really excited to be on with you. Thanks for having me on.
It's a blessing for me, brother. I appreciate your time. And, Bryan, it's really awesome to see what you have done with Irish Breakdown and really the side of sports, of media and analysis and coverage. I think is something that is certainly growing and is a lot of fun for us as fans to take that in. And I think for our listeners, it would be really great for you just to maybe share some insights to what your role is at Irish Breakdown and really the story of how it was founded.
Well, it's interesting. So I played college football at the lower levels, and I coached college football for 7 years, and I love the game. And I always wanted to be a part of it for a long time. I was one of those guys that grew up not wanting to play professional football or to play in college football, but to coach in college football and in the NFL. And so to be able to do that for a period of time was an incredible blessing for me.
Hmm.
And I was very fortunate to be able to do that for a time. And then I got out of coaching, went through some personal tragedy. Lost my best friend. He was murdered, and just went through a very dark time. And through that found God. And I had kind of grown up in the church and went to a Christian high school for 2 years. I was recruited there to play football. I didn't go there because it was a Christian church. I went there because they needed to start the quarterback to throw the football. And so I went there for that, but didn't really understand what salvation truly meant. I knew what it was scripturally. I knew what it was uh, in regard to people explaining, well, you repeat this prayer and all that. I didn't truly mean understand what it was in regard to the dying to yourself, being risen anew, giving your life over to Christ and saying that it's not about me, it's about him. I didn't do anything to get this. He did all the work. I'm just accepting the gift. And then what's asked of me in that. And so then I've been on a sanctification process ever since. And I actually went to seminary for a couple of years. I went to Denver Seminary, and all I needed to do was finish my final project. And I was going to do campus ministry just because I felt like that's what I should do since I'm not a coach anymore. But never truly felt that same calling to it. And I've always felt like if you're going to get into ministry, it needs to be a true calling, not just something you choose to do vocationally.
Absolutely.
And I never felt comfortable with that. And I got an opportunity to cover Notre Dame football. It kind of came out of the blue. And so my
Mm.
wife and I flew out to Indiana and
Wow.
met with the guy and interviewed for the job and got hired and did that for 2 years, then got back into coaching for 2 years, came back out and covered and got a chance to work for a magazine called Blue and Gold Illustrated, which is a
Mhm.
magazine I grew up reading,
Yeah.
covers Notre Dame football, and work with Lou Emoji, who was just an exceptional human being and
Mm.
someone I'd been reading and listening to since I was a kid, which he hated it when he hated when I say that, and
Mhm.
I tell Tim Priester this as well, who was on, I say, he's still on the beat. So, I read you guys when I was a kid. He's like, you stop saying that because it makes me feel very old. But it was a great blessing. And then 2019, I decided, it's time for me to kind of go do my own thing.
Mhm.
And so I started a website, or I partnered with Sports Illustrated to run a website,
Mhm.
and that was called Irish Maven. And I wanted to do a podcast, and I wanted to do something where I could just go talk, and it was going to be my thing. It wasn't going to be associated with
Mm.
anything else, and it was just going to be me talking football, breaking down football, kind of being nerdy with it, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to name it because I didn't want it to be associated with the website with Sports Illustrated. I wanted it to be kind of my own thing, and they were doing podcasts and those type of things. And so I was talking to my wife Angela, and we were discussing like, so what should I name it? She's like, well, what are you going to do? And I said this. She goes, well, why don't you? I mean, you're using the word breakdown a lot. You're going to break down this. You're going to break down that. How about Irish
Mhm.
breakdown? And I was like, I actually said it on a show that our show, somebody was asking about it. And it was like, it's
Mhm.
like, in a movie when something spiritual happened, there's like the angels singing in the
Yeah.
chorus and everything gets brighter. And then
Yeah.
it was like that kind of moment. We're like, oh, Irish
Mhm.
breakdown. Yes, that's perfect.
Love it.
And so I started doing that show in September of 2019, October of 2019.
Mm.
And that's kind of how Irish Breakdown launched. And so I'm the
It's
owner of
amazing.
it, and it's grown tremendously since then. We now have a podcast. We're
Mm.
partnered with Believe, which I'm excited about as our new podcast partner. And then, of course, we have the Irish Breakdown website, the Irish Breakdown message board,
Mm.
and it's grown beyond my wildest dreams. And I'm very blessed to have the platform that I do. But yeah, that's where Irish Breakdown came from, and how I started. And at first it was tough, because
Mhm.
you're starting something from scratch and you're
Yeah.
turning down a pretty good job and a steady paycheck to
Mm.
take a risk.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate to have a wife that was willing to go down that journey with me
Mm.
and be supportive of that journey. And so now we're here, and
Mm.
it's doing pretty well.
Such a cool story, Brian. Such a cool story. And I'd say, as a Notre Dame fan myself, it's amazing to see the content that you guys put out and the work that you do. And really, it's a part of the industry. I've had a lot of these conversations over the years of this podcast existing with coaches and athletic administrators, athletic trainers. And a lot of these conversations are focusing on people that are directly related to the team. What people can forget is the amount of work that goes into covering the team and providing the content that goes into helping the fans see the scope of the team and help them to better understand the game that they love. And so love the work that you do and the portion of the industry that you are serving in, because I do think it provides a ton of value. So love what
Thank
IB
you.
does, and you guys do a great job, especially in the short 5 years that you guys have been around. A lot of great coverage. So we
Thank you.
appreciate that. We really appreciate that. Brian, a curious question I had just thinking about, you spend a large portion of your professional life coaching, tons of years coaching the game you love. How difficult was it to transition from coaching to the game and being that close to it on the field every day, right with the players, to now covering the game in a different capacity?
It's much harder at first than it is now. Now
Mm.
I kind of like it. Now I kind of
Mm-hmm.
like that I get to work from home. And what's interesting is my first 5 years as a coach, I was single, and so it was easy. It was a lot easier. It was
Yeah.
like literally my entire life.
Mm.
I was I was a Christian in that I was a Western person from America,
Yeah.
and I who knew what the church was, and
Yeah.
I knew what to recite and those type of
Mm-hmm.
things, and it was all about me. It was I could take whatever job I wanted, move
Yeah.
wherever I needed to, take whatever paycheck I needed to. The second when I got back into, so I got out after the '05 season and got back in 2012, and I was married now,
Mm.
and my wife was a great coach's wife. I mean, Thursday nights we'd have all my receivers over the house. She'd make these big spreads. The first one was hilarious because she thought she had enough food. She's like, "Well, they're skinny. They're not going to eat a whole lot." And half the kids are going through, and she's like, "I'm out." So she's running out to the freezer, grabbing stuff to eat up. And
I
after that,
love it.
man, it was amazing. It was it was one of those things where she didn't sign up for that. She didn't
Mhm.
marry a coach
Yeah.
or someone that wanted to be a coach. And so her family's out in Colorado and Florida, and then she's in the middle of Northwest Ohio in this little small town, and I'm gone for weeks at a time because I'm on the road recruiting.
Mhm.
And I was a very just absent husband during
Yeah.
that period of time, and our relationship went through a very dark period. And I was like, look, this is just not, this isn't it. It wasn't the same fulfillment I had before.
Mhm.
And that made coming back into this business, my perspective changed so much
Yeah.
because I realized like I can still be around the game I love,
Mm.
but not, but, but be okay with that not being the dream anymore.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think it made me better at this. I mean, when I first did this job, I don't say rough around the edges because that makes it seem like I was learning something, but I just was kind of a jerk,
Yeah.
to be honest with you. I just was kind of a know-it-all, and I had all
Mm.
the answers, and criticism for me then was much different than it is now. It was much
Mm.
more personal. You just look back and you're just like, oh my gosh, like it makes me think of something. My wife and I, when we first got married, we were driving up to Breckenridge because as I told you off air, I went to seminary at Denver Seminary for a
Mhm.
couple of years, and we were driving up to Breckenridge for a conference she was doing. She worked for the Thornton Fire Department, and she had some conference up in Breckenridge, and we're listening to this marriage book on tape, and there was something that the guy said. I can't remember the name of the book, can't remember the name of the author, but he said
Mhm.
something that stuck with me. He goes, "You can be right, but wrong at the top of your lungs,"
Mm.
and like just like you can say the right thing to your spouse,
Yeah.
but if you're doing it in a way where you're being angry, or you may be right in what you're saying, but you're totally wrong in how you're saying it.
Mm.
And that was me when I first got into this profession. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm a former coach. I had a lot of success. I'm really smart. I know this. There's a lot of eyes, right?
Yeah.
And I want to make sure everybody knows how smart I am. And that's how it was presented.
Mm.
And I think a lot of it came down from I had a lot of frustration that I was no longer doing what I truly loved, which was
Mm.
coaching football, which was being around my players, which
Yeah.
was outsmarting the opponent and those type of things. And when I went through a lot of those things that I did and I came back to this profession, I realized like, you know, you you're not identified by this anymore.
Yeah.
That's not makes you who you are. And
Mhm.
you fast forward now, and there's a lot of learning experiences, but my fulfillment for a long time was being successful as a coach, being,
Yeah.
this and the smartest this and the best
Mm.
at that. And it came down to where like you're always going to feel empty that
Yeah.
way because
Absolutely.
you're not defined by that. And I didn't care early on about being defined as what kind of husband I was. I cared
Mhm.
about, am I good at this? Am I doing what I want to do vocationally?
Mm.
Now it's kind of like, yeah, I work hard and I want to be good at what I do vocationally. But if I'm
Mm.
great at what I'm doing vocationally, but I'm not a good husband,
Mhm.
then what does it really matter? And a
Yeah.
lot of those perspectives have changed over the years. And I've had to go through some rough patches to get there. And I think it's
Mhm.
made me not just a better husband, but also much better at this job. And how I interact with people is like, I don't always have to be right. I don't always
Yeah.
have to beat someone into submission till they finally admit that I'm right, even though
Mm.
and I think those
Yeah.
things have all changed, and it's helped me um, just be
Mm.
happier
Yeah.
every day, with not in a false sense of happiness, but more of a happiness where I can lay the pillow down at night and
Mm.
say, like, okay, did I put in a good day's work today? Yay or
Mhm.
nay? And just say, okay, that's all you can ask for.
Yeah.
And so it's been a very weird evolution, and I think especially the last, I think since I started my own business, and it changed a lot because now
Mm.
it's like you are the face of
Yeah.
Irish Breakdown. So if
Mhm.
you're this way, if you're ripping people on Twitter, and I used to get in tons of Twitter battles, and you may be right, but is
Yeah.
that really what you want to present?
Mhm.
And sometimes I find myself kind of falling. I was like, okay, let me delete that. Let me
Mm.
not be that
Yeah.
way, because I don't want to be that guy. It puts a different level of pressure on you. Like, look, when people think Irish Breakdown, they think Bryan Driskell.
Yeah.
So if Brian and vice versa, if they think of Bryan Driskell, they think of Irish Breakdown.
Mm.
So if you're being this way, then don't be shocked when people don't want to sign up for your site. So it's
Yeah.
it's been a humbling experience for sure.
No doubt. Very well said. I want to hone in on something you mentioned that really stood out to me. I think for a lot of our listeners, they're young professionals that love the sport industry. And when you're young and just getting into this industry, whether it's coaching or athletic administration, even front office work with a pro team, you have a lot of life in front of you, at least you think so. And so there's a passion to just care so much about the industry that you often forget about the more important things in life, including your faith in Christ. And I'm just curious to hear from you, what was that turning point in you realizing that your marriage and things outside of just your work, improving your profession, improving your success on the field, what was that turning point in which you realized that those things outside of your career were more valuable and really placing your identity in Christ above all things?
I think I'm still learning that, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think in a lot of ways I'm still learning that, but I would say it really came down to there was it was over a period of a few, and there's some things that kind of happened in our life that kind of went well for us. And I look back on it, and you just kind of have this feeling of that's not because of you.
Yeah.
Like you didn't do that. And like just I got out of coaching and I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And like 2 days later, I get a call. Hey, you want to come cover Notre Dame?
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. I didn't even apply for the job, just got called.
It's awesome.
And guy didn't know I wasn't coaching anymore. And you start to go through different things. You start to realize like, wow, God's really working on my life, and I'm doing nothing to deserve it.
Mm.
And just kind of realizing that when I started this job, it's like God bless you with this platform, and what are you going to do with it?
Mm.
And how do you want to represent Him is one thing vocationally, but more importantly, as a man, Noah, I look back at my coaching career, and if I were to give you my resume, it's like, boy, that's a lot of success. I was
Mm.
coached 7 years, and I coached all Americans, all conference players, won a national championship, won multiple national championships, was part of 3 teams that had the most wins in school history and all
Wow.
these different things. And you look back and say, boy, that's pretty fulfilling. And I'm like,
Mm.
not even kind of,
Wow.
not
Yeah.
even kind of, because I was never happy. It was never enough because
Mm.
I kept trying to fill this void in my life with championships and success and being the smartest guy in the room and oh well marriage will help fulfill me. I'll be able to fill that void with this spouse. And then you know what? I just became a bad husband. Why?
Mm.
Because it was still about searching for that
Yeah.
filling that emptiness in me.
Yeah.
And no matter how much success I had, I just was never happy.
Mm.
And because the happiness in my view was being defined by I thought was defined by how successful I was.
Mm.
I had a beautiful wife who was smart, who was educated, who had her own job, and I was a college graduate, and I had won championships and done this and done that, and I got
Mm.
people pursuing me to try and work for them, and I should be happy.
Yeah.
And I finally realized, like, I'm defining happiness the wrong way. I'm defining happiness from a worldly standpoint, when in
Mm.
reality, happiness is just knowing that I'm loved by Christ, and that
Yeah.
God is with me, and that it's not about me anymore, and it's not about how smart I am, and it's about following Him,
Mm.
knowing that He'll open or close whatever doors that He feels need to be opened or closed
Yeah.
to have whatever impact He wants me to have. And I think it was really came down to that, and it really came down through some very tough times in my life when I went through,
Mm.
where, to be honest with you, for a while there, we just did not like each other
Mm.
at all. I was a terrible husband. She was not the greatest wife on the planet. And that changed when, and it's funny how God kind of worked in our lives, but we had a dog named Brady.
Mm.
Loved Brady. He was the only thing that we agreed on was Brady.
Yeah.
And he was dying of cancer, and watching each other love on him the way that we did kind of softened both of us up a little bit towards each other.
Mm.
And there came a point in time in our conversations with each other where God kind of spoke to both of us separately, that says your biggest problem right now is your issues with your marriage are that you keep focusing on what she is or is not
Mm.
doing, and she keeps focusing on what you are or are not doing,
Yeah.
and saying like, well, I shouldn't show her respect because she's not respecting me,
Mm-hmm.
and vice versa.
Yeah.
And God spoke to me in different ways, and just with a sort of a screaming at my heart, and then leading me to scripture, where you realize like you don't respect your wife because she deserved it. just like you did not get salvation because you deserved it.
Amen.
God loves you,
Yeah.
right? God did this for you not because he deserves it, because he just does.
Amen.
Your calling is not to love your wife when she deserves it. Your calling is to love your wife, period, end of scripture. Because God told you to, and he told you how
Yeah.
to love and honor your wife. And I didn't know this at the time, but she was going through the same exact struggle and leading in her heart.
Wow.
And it got to the point where it's like you love her because you love her. You love her and honor her because you're commanded to, not because she has to live up to this certain standard
Yeah.
of reciprocation, that if you don't treat me right, I'm not going to treat you right.
Yeah.
And then that kind of led into every part of your life, where like you don't open this door for someone because you want them to praise you. You open the door for someone because that's how you were taught to treat people with respect, no matter whether they say thank you or not.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's something that really started to impact my life, and it's changed our lives and our marriage tremendously, where you do it because you love her. You don't love her because she deserves it. You love her because you love her. You love her because you're called to.
Amen.
And then how you treat her is how you do that. And that just kind of started manifesting into other parts of our lives. And you realize, like, man, we've gone through some stuff,
Yeah.
but happier than I've ever been. A lot, because you've defined happiness differently now. You define happiness by, are you walking with Christ? Is he a part of your daily life, to the point now where when he's not part of my daily life, you just feel like, just so empty, and it just calls you right back to it. And there's always peaks and valleys, right? And anyone that tells you, I think, otherwise is either way better than I am, or maybe not being honest with you. But just having that knowledge of who you're supposed to be, it puts all this into perspective, right? I love what I do. I love Notre Dame football. I love Irish Breakdown. I love the community we have. But at the end of the day, if it brings me joy, it doesn't bring me happiness.
Yeah.
And those are two different things.
Absolutely.
And that's what's kind of really helped that journey for me. I don't know if that answered your question. I hope it did.
It sure does.
That's where it was.
Oh, it sure does, Bryan. I really appreciate that answer. It, really just clicked in my mind that there is a power in understanding the gospel message of salvation through Jesus Christ. There's such a power. I love that you mentioned too earlier that there is this cultural Western Christianity that I think a lot of people live in, very nominal and not necessarily bad. It can instill good values. But at the same time, if it misses the truth of the gospel, which is free gift of grace by faith alone, as we read in Ephesians 2, then I think it's not going to cause heart transformation. I love the parable. I'm sure you've read it at some point in your journey, but Jesus talks about a king and a servant, and the servant owes the king an insurmountable debt. And the king, by his graciousness, forgives this man of all his debt, completely forgives him. But this servant goes back to his home and to one of his servants who owes him a much smaller debt and berates the servant and actually throws him in prison because of the debt he owes him. And the king comes back basically saying, how could you have not forgiven your servant after what I forgave you? And the parable is really pushing us as believers who have been forgiven an insurmountable debt to be able to show that grace to others and live a life that's not defined by treating people how they deserve or even trying to earn what we deserve, but understanding that we have been given grace, we need to pour that out to others. So it can really have a huge impact on the way we approach our lives, where we get our definition of joy and happiness from, like you mentioned, and even what we identify ourselves as. I know that so many times I've approached people and introduced myself as Noah with my job title, right? I'm sure you've done it with Bryan. I'm the owner of Irish Breakdown or whatever it is. And I don't think that's the way we should look at our value, because I think we do that out of a place of my value lies in my career. And I think it should be something where we identify ourselves as followers of Jesus Christ first and foremost, as disciples first and foremost. So I love what you mentioned there. I think it's applicable for young people as well, as they're managing their journey and trying to figure out where their identity lies in the young part of their career. You know, Bryan, our vision as an organization is to see the world's most influential industry, which I believe is sports, to be used for God's glory. How have you sought during your time with Irish Breakdown to use the platform you have as an analyst to share your faith and glorify God?
You know, that's been I don't say a challenge, but that's been something that I've kind of sort of struggled with a little bit for a time, because I have a rule of, we're a sports channel.
Yeah, for
You
sure.
don't come to Irish Breakdown because you want to talk about Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris, or you want to
Right.
talk about the latest budget fight, or you want to
Yeah.
talk about, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because, hey, look, there's people that subscribe to my site that are Democrats. There's people that subscribe to my site that are Republicans or independent. There's people that subscribe to my site who are Catholic or Protestant
Mm.
or Lutheran, or I mean, well, actually, that's Protestant. But what am I trying to think of? I mean, they're all types of denominations, and so it's like
Totally.
the one thing that
Yeah.
unifies this is Notre Dame football. But at the same time, I'm also a Christian, and so how do I show that? Well, number one, the big thing, and this goes back to saying earlier, is, well, dude, you could sit here and read scripture and pray every single day on your
Hmm.
channel,
Yeah.
but if you follow that up with your cursing at people and you're
Yeah.
demeaning people and you're being a jerk, then that's going to tamper that witness. And that's my big struggle, because I have a very aggressive personality, and I have a very I've had people say, like, dude, why are you coming to me this aggressive? Like, in mind, I'm like, dude, I'm just having a normal conversation. I don't know what you're talking about. It's just, that's my personality, and I've
Yeah.
had to learn to try to improve that, and I still struggle on it all the time. But so, okay, so I want to be sports only, but I also want to make sure that people understand who we are and
Mm.
who I am. And so as we've built a community, and it's not just a website, but it's a community,
Yeah.
it's gotten to the point where, I'm okay talking about my faith. I'm okay talking about God and Jesus if it's something that's
Mm.
applicable to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm okay telling people, like, I'm a Christian, and what does that mean for me, and
Mm.
talking with people about my failures and my struggles. And we've gotten to the point now where, just today we had a guy do a super chat asking us to pray for him.
Wow. It's
And
incredible.
because he's got a big interview coming up, and we have that kind of stuff. So we have people that will come to our channel and say, hey man, my brother's having surgery, I'm sick, I'm this. One of our subscribers lost his wife this past year,
Mm.
and to an illness,
Wow.
and he, right after she dies, he comes onto our site and he's like, hey, I need prayer, and I want it. But
Wow.
it wasn't just that he required prayer, but he wanted to be with a community of people that he felt cared for.
Mm.
At the end of the day, I realized that that's way more important than, hey, you
Absolutely.
really know your stuff about Notre Dame football. But
Hmm.
more so, like, you've provided a community where people can be themselves, but you're sharing the gospel with how you live, number one,
Yep.
but then also knowing that people can hear it in a way that's not coming across as preachy or
Mm.
judgmental. Not that I have an issue with either thing, but
Yeah.
this is the platform where that is necessary,
Hmm.
or where that's going to be accepted in the same way, because at the end of the day, it's going to be more about, they're going to watch how we live. I mean, one of my co-hosts is a pastor.
Wow.
His father passed away and he took over as the pastor of the church. And so it's like, but we are here to talk Notre Dame football. But that
Mm.
doesn't mean that we are afraid to let people know that we are believers. But it's
Mm.
more so about creating a community of people that treat each other a certain way,
Yep.
that know that this community is here for them. Hey, we may disagree on who the starting quarterback should be for Notre Dame, but brother, if you need prayer, man, you come to me
Mm.
right now, because that stuff over there, that's fun. That's that's
Yeah.
that's entertainment. That's something that at the end of the day doesn't mean a whole lot. But what
Mm.
you're going through right now with your spouse, or what you're going through right now with your health, or what you're going through right now with your family member, but that transcends whether you're Republican, Democrat, Independent, Baptist, Southern Baptist, Independent Baptist,
Yeah. Yeah.
Lutheran, Methodist, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
that all gets superseded by you. You're my brother in Christ, and we're going to sit here and pray for you right now.
Mm.
And because I've seen how prayers worked in my life,
Yeah.
and so, like, why would I not want that to be something that? And so we have people offering prayer requests all the time, and it's not to pump ourselves up, but it's just
Hmm.
it's exciting to see that what our community is built into, that people
Yeah.
feel comfortable enough to
Mm.
be open about that.
Yeah.
And the greatest
Absolutely.
compliment I was given, I'm trying to remember what basically somebody said that a guy emailed says, "I'm not sure if you're a Christian or not." He was relatively new to the channel,
Hmm.
and he said, "But I think you are. Am I right?"
Wow.
And I was like, "Wow, that was pretty awesome."
Wow.
Like,
That is awesome.
because he hadn't heard me talk about it, he hadn't heard, and I said, "Well, yeah, I am," and it was just like, okay, that's who we want to be.
Mm.
is because I feel like that's the greatest testimony. Because like, when you talk about the parables, there's the one, and I'm trying to remember what it was, but say, hey, look, I may not be the one that's planting the seed. I may be the one that's
Yeah.
watering the seed. I may,
Yeah.
we all have different roles in this thing. And for some people, it's to be pastors. So some people, it's to be preachers. And I think those two things are not always the same.
Yeah.
For
Sure.
some people, it's to be educators and, professors. Or for some people, it's just to be good neighbors. For some people, it's to be, we're meant to create disciples, but each person has their different things. And this is the strengths that God gave me. So how do you use your platform for that? And so I think we're doing a job, I don't say a good job on that, but we're growing in that. But there's still some things that I want to be able to do with our platform. We've done some things in the past where we've done a couple fundraisers for people. We did a fundraiser for our local community. We had a guy that came on and did a GoFundMe. He his baby, I'm trying to remember, something happened with this baby, and they needed money, and like we raised, like not we, but the community.
Yeah.
He just started, and I tweeted it out, and just within 24 hours, just thousands of dollars.
Wow.
And
It's amazing.
it's just like to see God working in that, but knowing that and like when that happens, it's, I mean, look what I did. Look at the platform I've created.
Yeah.
Look how awesome I am. It's more so, man, thank you, God, for using us to be able to do that. And look, trying to remember that, hey, you're a vessel that God is using to get his word out. You're not the one that's doing this. I'm using you to do this. And it's a very humbling thing, but also kind of an encouraging thing, because like, dude, it's not about me. Because at the end of the day, I may plant, you may plant, I may water, you may water, but the person who does all the all the reaping is the same person, at the end of that deal. And as the more I understood that, the more you're like, hey man, it's okay. Just be yourself, be open, be honest. And I also think that method also allows for people who maybe aren't believers to be more receptive to, hey, I know like this is an issue for me. I consider myself a Christian, but I did not like being around Christians, because the ones that I had been around in parts of my life were just like, dude, I'm at this Christian school. I guess I'm not really a Christian. I kind of thought I was. And I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't sleep around, and all y'all do, and you're going to tell me that I'm the one going to hell?
Right. Yeah.
Hard pass.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I was using that as an excuse not to give my life to Christ, because I knew what giving my life to Christ meant. It meant I couldn't always do the things that my flesh desired to do. But there's some realness to that too, to where if I'm just sitting there saying like, oh, every day, like, you're this, you're that, you can't be this, you can't be that, then I'm creating an environment that's not open to those type of people. I'm not a seeker sensitive church kind of guy, but if I can be someone who can be a positive example of just a Christian who treats people a certain way, no matter what your background is and here or there, then maybe that softens their heart to the person who will preach the gospel to them down the road. They might be more open to that because they've now been around other believers that are just good people. It's not just about me. It's about the community. Man, I'm just here for Notre Dame football, but this guy's going through a tough time, and look at all the money they raise for him just because they care. Like, maybe Christians aren't so bad all the time. And now someone comes along and they are preaching the gospel message to them, and they might be more open to it. So if that's our role, then that's our role, but also being open to the point where if there is an opportunity to preach the gospel, I'm called to preach the gospel, then I have to be prepared to do that. And at times I have done that more off air. It's not something we do in the show, but that has opened up some opportunities to do things behind the scenes and off air. Understand, like, this is your role. Make sure you're using it properly. And I don't always do that, but it gives you something to strive for. Because I know that God gave me this platform. He can take it away like that. And I'm not saying that, like, it's a vengeful God that the minute you don't live for me. I'm just saying, like, I understand that this is a temporary thing, whether that means it's going to last for another year until I die. But at some point in time, I'm not going to be doing this anymore. What am I going to do with it while I have it?
It's really well said, Bryan. I can say just from the times I've been able to tune into your show and check out some of your content that there's been multiple instances when I have seen you use the platform well for God's glory. And I just want to give you that encouragement that you're doing a great job. And, something that I love that you mentioned is not everyone is called into full-time professional ministry. But I think as a believer, Matthew chapter 28, the Great Commission, we're all called into ministry, no matter what you do. And this is why I love our organization and episodes like this where we can talk about this so freely and openly, is that you don't have to leave the industry of sports to now be ministering the gospel. In fact, we think that you can use your role and your impact and your influence and your platform to be a voice for Christ, to be a witness to who he is. One of my favorite scriptures is Acts chapter 1, verse 8, when Jesus tells his disciples that they will be his witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. And what's interesting about that is Jerusalem is obviously where the majority of Israelites lived, was the capital of Israel. Samaria was a place that Jews never wanted to venture into because there was a lot of hostility. And then to the ends of the earth, to the Gentiles, who many Orthodox Jews of the day thought were untouchable for God, right? That those were people that were condemned. And Jesus tells them to go to the ends of the earth, to all those places that they would never go naturally. And I believe that God calls us into all spaces and to use our gifts and abilities to glorify his name. So I'm encouraged about that, of what you're doing through your role at Irish Breakdown and using your platform in that way. It's really awesome, brother. Really awesome to see. I'm curious, just the industry of being an analyst or being a broadcaster or being in sports media can oftentimes be a tough industry because of how brutal it is and sometimes how brutally honest people are, and trying to walk the line of being an honest journalist, an honest analyst, but also being someone that doesn't defame somebody's name or disrespect someone. My curious question is, how does your faith influence the way you approach your job differently than, say, the average sports analyst?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that because I would have to kind of understand why other people do what they do.
Yeah,
And I'm hesitant to say that my faith is the reason that I'm this way, because
for sure.
I'm sure that there's non-believers out there that look at their job and believe. First, so here's an example. So you talk about why I like think I'm better at my job now than I was 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, I think a lot of the way that I delivered criticism, even just football criticism, would come off very personal,
Mm,
to where I could understand if someone met me personally that they may not like me or may want to, have some harsh words.
yeah.
And to say, look, you can be critical of someone's performance or whatever without it coming across as personal.
Mm,
And that's something I've really tried to work on in recent years, and I think I've gotten a lot better at, according to feedback I get from
yeah.
parents of players and things like that. Like, pretty hard on my kid football wise, but it never comes across as personal.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
and that's something that I try to be. But I mean, there's other people who aren't believers that are that way, and I think
Yeah.
sometimes we can fall into this vacuum of, well, you're only a good person because you're a Christian.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Well, not really.
Right.
You may choose to walk a certain way for your own fulfillment or for whatever else. It doesn't mean that, you've been
Mm,
washed by the blood of Christ, right? And I mean, and just because you're preaching doesn't mean that you've found the pathway to heaven. I mean,
yeah.
what do we see in Matthew? Hey, Lord, I prophesied in your name, I cast out demons in your name, and he says, basically, be gone, I never knew you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't think that that's necessarily what compared to other people. I can just tell you what it's done for me. It's made
Mm,
me better at my job, because it's more about like, okay, you're right in what you're saying. The coach made a bad call. The player made a bad play.
mhm.
But is that really the way that you want to explain it or break it down or
Yeah.
treat them or hammer them or whatever? You can't get that same point across in a more gracious manner. And that's something that I struggle with every day, because again, my personality is not that way. I'm a
Mm,
very, my wife and my dad and mom will all tell you, like, I could make you feel, exactly how I feel just
mhm.
by the look.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
a very expressive guy. I'm loud. I'm very, you can see I'm not like Will Ferrell. Like, I don't know what to do with my hands right now. Like, my hands are always moving,
Yeah. Yeah.
and understand, like, okay, that's who you are, but okay, step one is identifying the problem, step two is fixing it, right? Like, you don't always
Absolutely.
have to be right in that manner. It's okay to be right with some grace. It's okay to be right with some mercy. It's
Mhm.
okay to be right in a way that's not going to be perceived by the person you're criticizing as, I have a personal issue with you. And then
Yeah.
I fail at that still, but trying to look at it that way, my faith has impacted me that way.
Mm. Yeah.
It may not impact you that way.
Yeah.
And there's people that may look at doing the job the way that I'm talking about now that aren't doing it because of their faith.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
I can't speak to how it compares to what others do. I can only tell you how it's made me better at this job, and how
Mm.
it convicts me when I'm not doing what I need to do and I'm not called to do.
Yeah.
And that's all I can do. I can't speak to how it impacts other people.
Yeah.
I can only speak to how my faith has really, I think, made me better at this job,
Mm.
and will hopefully continue to make me better at this job. And understand, like, being right's okay. It's your job. If you're
Yeah.
not right very often, then no one's going to want to listen to you.
Right. Exactly.
But how are you expressing that? Do you come
Mm.
across as arrogant? Do you come across as condescending? Do you come across as rude?
Mm.
Are you insulting of a coach?
Yeah.
Sometimes I am, and sometimes because I think a coach deserves it. Brian Kelly would probably think I'm pretty insulting, but that's just kind of part of it. But
Yeah.
that's how it's affected me. It's like how I
Mm.
how I treat people, how I
Yeah.
interact with people. For someone who has a naturally aggressive, reactionary type of communicating,
Yeah.
it can be a struggle. So being aware of that, and being aware of God's not going to be like, oh, I know that you were a real big prick to that guy, but it's okay. It's just your personality.
You're right. Yeah.
No, it is your personality. So fix it.
Yeah.
Be
Absolutely.
aware of it.
Yeah.
And how do you fix it? By, understanding what I'm being called to do and how I'm being called to live.
Mm.
And it helps me. And
Yeah.
when I do fail, it helps me recognize it was a failure and either
Mm.
change it, or sometimes it involves me reaching out. Hey, look, man, I responded to you way aggressively than I meant, because I think it was a month or two ago. I responded to a guy on Twitter, and then I read my response later. And I was like, oh my gosh, that came across way more aggressive than in my head. I'm just natural response, but I'm like, dude, I could see that being. And so hey, look, man, that came across way more aggressive than I
Mm.
intended it to. That's on me. That's my bad.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
not offer an explanation or a justification, but just, dude, that's on me. That you
Yeah.
didn't deserve that. You didn't
Yep.
you didn't you didn't do anything to get that kind of response. I didn't mean it that way.
Mm.
That's on me. That's my
Yeah.
bad.
Love that. I want to grab onto a word you said, and it was conviction. And I think as a believer, the best part about the Christian life is you walk in freedom, where you're not being judged by the Lord every day based on your performance, but He is loving you enough. Hebrews 12, one of my favorite passages in all of the Bible. Hebrews 12 talks about how God treats us like a father would, and He disciplines us out of love. And if we respond to that discipline, He's making us more like Himself. And Paul talks about it as taking off the old self, putting on the new self, becoming the new man. And I do think that is so encouraging to hear that you are aware of that in your job, in the way you do your work. And for our listeners, I think we should be responding to convictions from the Holy Spirit in the process of sanctification, not just in our personal lives or how we manage personal relationships, but in how we approach our work. One of the biggest challenges that I have seen Christians face in sports is oftentimes sacrificing their character and their morality that they're called to win a championship, to get a promotion, to make themselves look better, to appear or on the media platform they're sharing on. And it's so easy to begin to lean into, oh, I'm so passionate about just getting into this career field or having success, that you then sacrifice the more important things that God is calling you to, which ultimately is representing Him well and being a good witness. So I appreciate you sharing that. And it's hard. It's hard to do it.
It's very hard, especially nowadays that everything is geared towards clicks, right? I mean, how do you get paid on this podcast? You want to get more people to view it. Well, you know
Right.
what? If you had real confrontational interviews with all the people you did,
Mm,
make a lot more money.
yeah, you would.
So would I.
Yeah. Yeah.
But okay, but do I want to make money that way? Like,
Mm,
one of the things that we do, it's minor, but like, I don't make predictions for kids that are going to commit to Notre Dame.
mm,
I
yeah.
know where the kid's going to commit, but I'm like, this is his moment. Now,
Right.
if I broke that story, I could get a lot more clicks for it. But
For sure.
but I'm taking that moment from him. Now, others still do that. That's
Mm,
their decisions. But that's a decision we made. Now, that costs you money.
yeah.
There's certain things that we do that we don't do that. Hey, look, we're just not going to do that here, right? And I could say things a certain way, and say things that I know that I've learned that could create a big story. But it's like,
Mm,
yeah, but do you really want to burn that person for that? Do you really want to
yeah.
sacrifice your reputation so that you can get the story? But that's what this industry encourages you to do.
It does.
be loud and obnoxious like everyone else, swear like everyone else,
Right.
like talk about this inappropriate thing like everybody else does, make this little joke like everybody else does,
Yeah.
embarrass someone, and so it goes viral.
Yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
and this business encourage you to do all that, and you got to ask yourself, like, is it really worth it to climb up the ranks that way?
Yeah.
Is it worth it to get those clicks and get that money that
Mm.
way?
Yeah.
and and you've got to make that decision, and for me the answer is no, it's not. And I hope for every believer it's like, no, it's not. You can
Right.
do your job, you do it well, you can do it with professionalism, without resorting to some of the things that the world may tell you is, well, that's just how it's done. Well,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of things that are just done that way that the Bible's like, yeah, but that's the world. That's not what we're calling you to do. And I don't think that if I kneel before God at the end of my days and he's like, look, I understand you had to make that money. I get why you acted that way. I get that
Yeah.
you did this. I get that you thought it was cool to talk negatively about your wife because other men may think it's funny, and it got you extra. I understand you embarrassing that guy publicly in that show. I get it, man. You had to make your money, Brian. I get it, buddy. You had to pay that mortgage. All good, man. I don't think the conversation's going to go that way.
I don't think so either.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And ultimately, what are we living for? Because um, it's what impact you want to make in the world. I guess is really something that's humbled me. Is at the end of the day, when I pass away, and we had someone that I worked with, Lou Emoji at Blue and Gold, who passed away a few years ago. And I'm listening to everybody talk about Lou, and he was the preeminent historian on Notre Dame. Like it would be great. We'd be sitting in a game at Notre Dame, and the Notre Dame people, the statisticians would release some sheet with, this is the first time Notre Dame's rushed for this many yards and so, and almost it felt like weekly. He'd go back, hey, actually, the last time they did this was this time. And they would just immediately, they wouldn't even check his work. They would, oh, Lou said that, they'd fix it. But when he passed away, people talked about that. But more so what people talked about was he was such a great man. He was such a sweet guy. He was such a good person to be around. And you're just like, okay, if I died tomorrow, people might say that I'm smart. They might say guy knew football, but are they going to be like, what a great guy?
Yeah.
Probably not. And that guy had a strong faith in God. Probably not.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, is that really what you want to be known for? That you were or can't you be that, but then also be someone? I mean, Lou was a great writer, a great historian, but he was also a great guy.
Yeah.
And that really impacted me to be like, and not so much that I care about my legacy, but it's more about the impact he had on people's lives by being that way.
Yeah.
And that's really was something that convicted me of like, okay, yeah, dude. Yeah, you may be good at this, you may make money, but at the end of the day is like, that's really what you want to be remembered by? Or do you care more about that guy that reaches you out in that email and says, hey man, I'm really glad you shared that. I'm really glad you shared that that moment where you were broken, where you messed up, where you screwed up, because I'm going through the same thing and I'm really struggling. And it's like, that matters so much more than, hey dude, you nailed that evaluation of that quarterback. He turned out to be really good.
Yeah.
But my thing is, why can't you do both?
Yeah. For sure.
And you should do both if you're a
Definitely
believer.
Yeah, you definitely should do both. I think of, Jesus teaches Matthew chapter 6 that instead of storing up treasures on earth where moth and vermin destroy, store up treasures in heaven. And I think that perspective, living eternally minded, I teach this to our kids all the time in our ministry. If you live eternally minded, you'll approach everything you do in life with an eternal perspective. And that includes your work, which means you do it well, because Psalm 77 talks about this, that if we fail to be competent in our work, that'll be a poor witness to Christ, or poor witness to our faith, right? Because we're not able to do our work well. Maybe we're lazy. Maybe we're just not pursuing it the way we should, and that's a problem. But at the same time, if our character is lacking, it's also a problem. So those things have to go together. That was a great point. And Brian, I want to get you out of here on time. I know you had a 5-hour show before this, so I want to respect your time.
Still can't believe that.
In your
I
evening.
looked like, oh my gosh, it's 6 o'clock. Are you serious? Man, I got this interview I got to do. I'm so sorry.
I love it. And I'm curious, Brian, you're a busy guy. You guys put out a lot of content on Irish Breakdown. You write a lot of great stories, pump out a lot of great shows like the 5-hour show today. And I can imagine that it keeps you busy. What are some spiritual disciplines and habits that you've built into your routine of your life to stay strong in your faith despite those busy demands?
Well, I'm still in the process of doing that, and I've learned that I have to be intentional about certain things.
Yeah.
So if you were to ask me 6 months ago, do you pray for your wife every day? I'd have been, of course. But then if you just said, okay, walk me through your last 5 days.
Mm,
Okay, you know what, dude? I don't think I actually did pray for my wife in the last 5 days. I thought about praying for my wife the last 5 days, but I didn't.
yeah.
So I set an alarm every night, 9:55, because that's her. Angela's bedtime is like she starts winding down at like 9:30, and then 10 o'clock she's in bed. So
Hmm.
every night, alarm goes off my phone. Pray for Angela.
Wow.
Not just sit and pray, but walk upstairs, pray over your wife.
Wow.
Now, for some husbands, that's just what they do. For
Mm,
me, it isn't. I don't even realize it's time to go.
mm,
It's 1 o'clock, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, and and my wife's been asleep for hours. So, trying to be intentional, like, hey, listen, you need to do this, then make time for it. And then, and my wife and I were talking about this on our drive home. We went on a little trip this past weekend,
mm,
and we're on the drive back. We're talking about how can we be more intentional in our marriage? How can we be more intentional in our walk?
mm.
Where yeah, I have to be intentional. Make time to get in the Word. Make time to pray. Make
Yeah.
time to spend with your wife, because otherwise you're going to get too busy to do it. And the more you commit to it, then the more that becomes your routine,
Yep.
and it just becomes more normal. And trying to get my wife to understand, like, hey, you know, you may have a time to work out and a time to pray, but something happens where you can't do both of them. So do them together.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to just get on your knees and pray
Yeah.
to pray. Yes,
Yep.
we're called to do that, but there's also nothing that says, like, hey, as you're doing this that
Mm.
you have to get done, you can't have something on in the background that's
Yeah.
uplifting, or you can't be in prayer and be
Yeah.
thinking and thankful, or offering thanks to God, or offering a an intercession on somebody's behalf, or offering a request to God. Just making it trying. I have to be intentional, because if I'm not, I get so wrapped up in my work that I don't think about those things naturally, which
Yeah.
is a problem. And I'm working on trying to get to the point where it is. And so just trying to be more intentional with, hey, set an alarm, set a
Mm.
time, make sure that you're putting time aside to be a husband, to be a child of God, to make sure you're praying for your family, make sure you're praying for this. My wife has a war room upstairs, and she's
Mm.
trying to be more intentional about going into your war room and spending time in the Word and uplifting your family and praying for yourself, and being an intercessory on behalf of others and those type of things. I got to be intentional about it. Some people, it just comes naturally to them. For
Mhm.
me, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I'm very obsessed with my work
Mm.
and very task oriented. If I don't be intentional about, like, not just, okay, make sure you pray tomorrow, but like setting an alarm that reminds me to pray for
Yeah.
my wife, that's
Yeah.
terrible that I have to do that. But I also know myself, and so it helps me to say, hey, look, do this. And
Mm.
I'm hoping that someday it's like you get to 9:55, you're like, hey, I think it's time to go pray for my wife, and it just
Yeah.
becomes more habit. I'm working on that, but it's really
Amen.
just about being intentional, especially
Mm.
as a business owner, because it's like from the moment you get up to the moment you go to sleep, there's no 9 to 5 when you run a business.
Yeah. For
Like,
sure.
it's if there's a problem at 7 o'clock, I can be like, well, I'm off the clock. Sorry, not my problem.
Yeah.
Uh, so being very intentional, make sure that, hey, we're making dinner together every night.
Mm.
We're
Yeah.
not tonight because she's getting a massage, but
Yeah.
we did last night. But
Yeah.
being more intentional about those things,
Mm.
with my wife, but also with my faith, and saying, like, look, you got to feed yourself, man. You can't just, hey, you were saved, and so you're good. I mean, you are
Mm.
good in a spiritual sense,
Yeah.
but you got to feed yourself every day, man.
Yeah.
Because if all you're doing is feeding stats and data and all this, but you're not spending time in the Word, then
Mm.
that's all you'll be.
Yep.
Is
Yeah.
you can win some sports trivia contests, but go do a Bible trivia contest and see how you do in that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that doesn't define your salvation. It's just making a point that
Mhm.
if this is all you fill yourself up with, then that's what's going to come out. And you
Amen.
got to be intentional if you're like me, where you're so task oriented that everything else gets drowned out.
Yep.
Gotta, man, make sure you're intentional about spending time with your wife. Make sure you're intentional about spending time
Mm.
in the Word. Make sure you're intentional about spending time in prayer. Not in those order, right? So it should be God first, family second. But
Yep.
you get
Yeah.
the point,
Yeah.
and that's what I have to do, because if I don't, I will struggle big time to make those things a priority.
Mm, very well said. I love the word intentionality, because I do think when you are in the industry of sport, it's not a 9 to 5, something we talk about all the time. It's certainly not. No matter you're a coach, you're an administrator, you're an analyst, it's all going to be extended hours, weekends, evening hours, traveling. And I think the intentionality piece of prioritizing your faith. We have a program. It's the USG Academy, and part of the goal of that program is to instill for 8 straight weeks daily 15 to 30-minute habits of being in the Word and prayer for young professionals in sports. And what I love about that is it shows young professionals who make the excuse of, I don't have time, that they do have time, right? When they're put into a program and into a system that makes it a priority, it becomes possible. And I think to your point, being intentional is essential. Things like phones and using reminders on your phones is a great way to do that. But just making sure it becomes a part of your routine. So
Don't be afraid to delete apps either.
yeah, for sure.
I had to do that this weekend. I just, because like when you work like we do, and it's a lot of it's mental,
Yep.
dude, I don't want to think about this other. I just want to decompress
Yeah.
and play some mindless game on my phone. Then you're
Yeah.
like, you spent an hour doing that
Mm-hmm.
and 5 minutes praying.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, okay, this is a distraction that I don't need.
Yeah.
So sometimes you got to be one to say, hey, delete,
Yeah.
because
Sacrifice.
I'm not strong enough. But yeah, just being willing to say, hey, listen, man, what you prioritize will be what comes out. Like what you put in is going to be what comes out.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say, like, it's not natural for you. It's not something that you do. It's okay to admit that.
Yeah, for sure.
But then do something to try to make it better.
Yep.
Or if it doesn't get better, then just continue to be intentional. Because if it becomes a habit, it doesn't mean that it's going to stay one, because then you may get in a busy season again, and then all of a sudden those habits that you had before are gone.
Yep.
And then also I would encourage young people, have, for the young men, have brothers in Christ in your life that will speak truth to you. For the young ladies, have sisters of Christ in your life that will speak truth to you. Hey, man, I've noticed on your shows a lot more. You're getting a lot more aggressive. You've dropped a couple curse words lately. You okay, man? And to be like, hey, remember who you are. Remember what you're trying to be. That's a very important thing, because if you don't have people in your life that are willing to tell you the truth about who you are, man, that you're missing something very important, very important. And I'm fortunate to have some of that. Not just my dad, who listens to our show all the time. He'll be like, hey, man, listen, son, that's not okay. But having brothers in Christ that are willing to say, hey, man, I love you. That's why I'm telling you what you did today was not okay, man. You were right in what you were saying, but you were wrong in how you went at that guy today.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important thing, especially in coaching.
Yep.
Because the culture of coaching is, it's okay to curse when you're coach. Like I look back at my coaching career and I have so many regrets of like, I could have said that in such a different way. My language is so bad. And just, I wish I would have been more patient with this kid, and more, you look back at those regrets and you're just like, I wish I would have had someone that would have told me then, but that wasn't the culture. The culture wasn't, I mean, it's like in coaching and college. Well, hey, you just accept the fact that you're not going to be a present husband and father. Why?
Yeah.
Why do you accept that?
Yeah.
And is it really worth it? And you need people in your life that will say, hey, man, I know things are going well right now, but are you taking care of business at home? Like, are you doing this? Because I see you doing this, this, and this, and this, but I don't see a whole lot of you doing that, at home. And if you don't have people like that in your life that are willing to speak truth to you, not what you want to hear, but what you need to hear, then you're missing a very important ingredient. And I think that's biblical. I mean, I think that what does the church tell us to do? The church doesn't say, don't judge others. The church says this is the proper way to judge others.
Correct.
Two brothers go to your house and they handle it this way. I mean, we're meant to live that way. And it's, if the people around you aren't willing to speak truth to you, then they're not people who are truly care about what's best for you. It's like a parent. I mean, do you love your child do you not love your child when you scold your child or offer rebuke to your child? No, you rebuke your child because you love your child. You don't let them get away with, you don't let your child set their own bedtime, not because you want to be in control, because you know that proper rest is needed and proper boundaries are needed and things like that. It's out of love. And I think we all need that, especially men. And I'm speaking that because I am a man, so I'm speaking it from my experiences. When I've had times in my life where I didn't have brothers that could speak to me about who I was, is when I would kind of, it's harder to yank it back. You need people that love you, that care about you enough to tell you, hey, man, not okay what you did today. Not okay what you're doing, man. I'm not the Bryan that you said you want to be. I'm not seeing right now. And because I'm the type of guy, sometimes I may reject it initially. But then when I take a step back and I'm like, you know what, man, he's right. It's like sometimes my wife and I'll disagree. We'll have an argument, and I'll just like, man, and then I'll sit down and I'll take a minute, take a deep breath. I'm like, man, she was totally right. My heart said, what do? Walk upstairs and you freaking apologize. And you don't say, Here's why I acted. Hey, baby, that's on me.
Yeah.
I was wrong. You didn't deserve that. You know, me having a bad day is no excuse for me talking to you that way.
Yeah.
You're not the reason I'm having a bad day.
Yep.
And same thing with, hey, man, you know what? I snapped at you a little bit earlier because I didn't want to hear what you were telling me, but I needed to hear it. Thank you for that.
Yep.
And it's important to have people like that in your life.
Couldn't agree more. Community, fellowship, right? In the church, in parachurch ministries, have that community and accountability, really. Christian accountability is essential. We're not meant to do this walk alone, which is why God built the body the way he did, with many members under one head, and that is Christ. So, Bryan, I just appreciate you, man. Appreciate what you do at Irish Breakdown. I know it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time to run a business and to analyze the game of football, and so I appreciate that. But even more so, man, I appreciate your faith and your vocal nature of being willing to share your faith and just the insights you provided us today. So I appreciate that. Last question I got is, how can our listeners find your content?
Well, you can, obviously, if you're on YouTube, you can go to type in Irish Breakdown. You'll find our YouTube channel there. We also put out daily podcasts. So we like long shows. So like today we had a 5-hour show, which is way longer than we normally do. But on the podcast app, you can go to Irish Breakdown at Apple or Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, and we'll break them down into segments. So it's not just like a 5-hour long podcast. It'll be 4 or 5 segments in this particular instance. You can find us there. We have our website, irishbreakdown.com. You can find out all our free written articles. And then our Champions Lounge, boards.irishbreakdown.com, is where you can find our premium content. There's things that we only put on that site. It's where our community really gets together and talks about sports. And we'll also, we have a couple prayer requests on there today, actually. That up so yeah, you can, anything that just I try to make it as easy as possible. irishbreakdown.com, boards.irishbreakdown.com, Irish Breakdown on YouTube, Irish Breakdown on podcast. Try to make it as easy as possible as we can for you.
Love it. It's definitely worth checking out that content, even if you're not a Notre Dame fan. If you're a football fan, worth checking out. But Bryan,
we talk about all things. We did a segment on Clemson the other day.
Love it.
Is Clemson back? You know, are they going back up? Are they going to, with some of the things they've done this offseason? So we love talking ball. We love talking college football. So we talk about all types of stuff. We have Ohio State fans in our daily chat. We have LSU fans in our daily chat. So I think people appreciate, we'll be real about things. And I think that's what people like.
Absolutely. Well, Bryan, I just appreciate your time. Thanks for being here with us, man. It's good to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
If you want to get involved with Uncommon Sports Group and the mission that we are on to help you navigate the sport industry as followers of Christ, learn how you can get involved on our website at uncommonsg.org. That's uncommonsg.org. Be sure to catch a new episode of the Uncommon Podcast every other week on Thursdays at midnight Eastern Time. Until next time, we pray that you will strive to be uncommon by glorifying the name of God in whatever you may do. See you next time.